I started my blog 9 months ago, and most of the feedbacks I've received on my posts so far was on the topic of my writing style, my English, with people being pretty impressed or intrigued by my style. So since there was some level of interest in this topic, I thought I'd explain a little bit my philosophy on my style, and maybe give you a couple of tips on how you can improve yours if you're interested. So I'll start with some of the inspirations I have and the kind of objective or what I'm trying to do with my style. So three books that were influential in my teens are To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, Vie Devant Soi by Émile Ajar, and Gagner la Guerre de Jean-Philippe Jaworski. And what they all have in common is that they have a very strong, they're in novels, first person voice, and they have a very strong personality. So basically, the main protagonist talks with a very specific voice. So every sentence is kind of written with a specific style, and it's really interesting. It's got a lot of personality, and but all of them make for very interesting reads. And I would recommend you read them. But in the original language if you can, because it'd be very hard to translate, I think. And basically, it inspired me to try and write in a way where the writing in itself is interesting. It's not just the substance, but also the style is interesting, and just each time you read a bit or a sentence, you're engaged with it. Now, I don't know if I've managed to make every single sentence I write engaging, but hopefully, on the whole, it's entertaining on top of being insightful. Or at least that's the objective. I think another it's a bit different, but another style that inspired me is not really necessarily in the writing, but more in the form of humor, and that would be this kind of British roundabout humor and snark. So, for example, you have like Monty Python, or when it comes to writing or expression directly, you've got the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by here, Douglas Adams. My bad. And then there's also Yahtzee Croshaw, who's got a similar style. He does YouTube videos, like video game reviews, but he also wrote books like Differently Morphous, for example. And I think that they're very good. Their style is very funny, very interesting to read. The story and characters aren't as good, I think, or it's not as interesting, but the writing is very good and very quotable. I think so. That's I think both of these, this type of humor, and then the idea of having a text that's rich in personality, are two things that I'm trying to emulate to an extent. It's not like I copied a specific style or tried to, reproduce something, but it's just the general spirit behind it. Another type of writing that I enjoy also, I think, that has less personality, but where the style is kind of unobtrusive and it serves to reinforce the message. Like it's very engaging just because you don't notice it, but it helps you. It's very well done in a way, but discreetly. I think a few books that come to mind that I read recently on the topic would be The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. It's got a little bit of style, but it's not too noticeable, and it serves the message. You've got Into the Magic Shop by James Doty. Also, you don't even notice, but it's a breezy read. And then Internal Family System Therapy, second edition by Richard Schwartz and Marcia Sweezy. Similarly, you don't really notice the style, but it's very clear and understandable, and you just kind of breeze through it also. So when it comes to kind of improving or getting good at writing, I think like most skill, three of the most important criteria are intrinsic motivation, time, and practice. And I think intrinsic motivation is the most important one because it'll help make everything else easier. So that's just how much you just enjoy thinking about the topic and practicing it by just on its own because it's fun for you, rather than because you're hoping to get some external achievements or rewards. And then time and practice, that's not a particularly new idea, but and I separate them because you can, even if you're not directly practicing, if you're interested in the topic and with time, you'll just learn more about it. So I think important criteria to get better with like language is curiosity, and so that ties into intrinsic motivation. But trying to learn new words when you catch a new expression, or when you're reading a book and you kind of find something new, you look it up, and you're just kind of having fun with language and finding new interesting ways of phrasing stuff uh, in order to improve your vocabulary and your kind of how would you say how at ease you are in a language. Immersion is a good way to do that. I know that I improved a lot in English. I kind of cheated because my mother is a native English speaker, so that was easier for me. But I got better once I started reading books, watching TV shows, etc. And another perk of doing that is that you hear more natural language and more like variants of like different slangs and different vernaculars that you wouldn't really learn in a school environment. And then it's also about making a habit of learning new words and trying to, well, at least it depends on the style you want to go for. But for me, it would be developing a habit of kind of having fun with language and trying to phrase things in an interesting way. I know that for me, I like doing this not just when I'm writing for a blog, but also when I'm writing in conversations with friends or just in my own journal that nobody else reads. But I just find it more fun to write in a way that's kind of interesting, or with like some little funny aspects, or kind of a different way to phrase something. And if you kind of get it, so yeah, I think it's more fun for me because it adds a little extra challenge on top of just conveying information. The way of conveying the information is also matters, and it adds a little twist. And it's also more interesting when you are on the receiving end, because on top of just getting the information, you can also it's more engaging. And I think if you, well, at least for me, doing that without even just naturally over time, I think it kind of trained me. And so even when I'm not actively trying to phrase things in an interesting way, it's easier for me to become more of a natural thing to do. Another important aspect, I think, is using tools. I think sometimes people think that when someone is good at something, it's just, it just naturally comes to them like some out of nowhere. But I think a large part of it is just you knowing how to use tools. So I think the two most important ones are dictionaries and thesaurus. So the dictionary just helps you see all the different meanings of a word and learn more about it. And also, you can check out the etymology and learn stuff this way. And then the thesaurus helps you find synonyms and a lot of different new words and options. And then you can use them in conjunction. So, if you want you don't know all the synonyms for a specific word, then you can plug them in the dictionary and learn what they are. The tools I would recommend, and the ones I use, are the Wiktionary. It's available in different languages and it's good. And then for the thesaurus, I use a website called Power Thesaurus. And I think another thing that helps, or that will increase how quickly you learn new vocabulary, is if you, like me, dislike repeating yourself. So if when you're writing a text, you notice that you're using several times the same words or formulation, then you can. It's a good time to use a thesaurus and find a synonym or find new ways to say the same thing, and then you just grow your language naturally this way. Other tools I use for translating are Google Translate and Lingui. So Google Translate gives me, when a word comes to me in one language and I want to actually use it in the other one, I'll translate it with Google Translate, and then I'll use the thesaurus to find because usually the translation from Google Translate aren't incredible, but with the thesaurus you can find a good synonym you wanted. And then Lingui helps you translate idiom and expressions that don't have a one-to-one. Like if you just translated word by word, it doesn't make sense because it's a specific idiom and a specific language. And then lastly, for proofreading, I use Grammarly and Language Tools, which are both pretty good. And you can check your grammar and make sure you didn't let any mistake slip through. And then sometimes you'll learn new rules that you didn't even know existed thanks to them. One thing I'd recommend, it's good to listen to these rules. Especially Grammarly has kind of a style guide that is trying to enforce on you, and then out there on the internet and all, you can learn a lot of different best practices from different writers on how to write. I say take it with a grain of salt. Like, it's good to know about these rules, but you don't want to. let yourself be needlessly constrained by them. So, for example, Grammarly dislikes emphasis. So if you use really, truly, very like if you kind of try to put an additional words that aren't strictly necessary, but that kind of add emphasis, Grammarly doesn't like that. If you use a passive voice, Grammarly does not like that. And so they try to have a very short, to the point style. I like the passive voice personally. It's part of the kind of roundabout way of of expressing yourself that ties back to the kind of British style I mentioned earlier. But the passive voice shall be used if I so please. And I'd say another thing that that a lot of people like to discourage is using adverbs. I don't know why people hate adverbs so much. I personally love them. So I shall use adverbs lavishly and heartily. And if you're not happy, kindly piss off. Well, I mean, everybody can do what they want, and it depends on your style. I think that's another thing that's important is you need to keep in mind the context or what the writer is going for, because what they're aiming for might not be what you're trying to do, right? So I think the context matters, and I care about originality, strong personality, and I don't really like this idea of streamlining everything or having everyone do exactly the same thing. So you gotta think about whether it applies to you or not. But yeah, that's one last thing I'd like to leave you with. All right, so I hope this was at least a little bit interesting and that maybe you learned something. I'll leave all links to the different books and tools I mentioned in the description. And thanks for watching. Have a nice day.